Thank you so much for joining CalChiro for another Virtual Vendor Friday with Pure Life Science, a maker of Pure Form Omega Natural. So Pure Form Omega Natural, it's an all-organic plant-based fatty acid supplement that improves health of cellular membranes for the entire body. And there will be some giveaways today, so make sure that you listen for those. If you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A feature that's at the bottom of the screen. And if for some reason we can't get to them, the Pure Form Omega team can answer any questions later on. So for now, I would like to introduce you to your speaker for today, Dr. Jeff Matheson, Medical Director of Pure Life Science.
Thank you very much. So this is an interesting experience because I'm used to lecturing in front of an audience, and having it done remotely is it's a little strange speaking into a computer, but hopefully everybody can hear me. And I want to tell you a little bit about what I do. I was an emergency room physician for 18 years, and I've been a chronic pain management physician for about the last 17 years. I decided that about 8 years ago that things were not really right in the medical field. When I was doing chronic pain management, and chiropractors certainly know this, that when you start maxing out on all your medications and people aren't going back to work, you better change your approach or you're not going to be very happy with your job. And I was certainly unhappy at that point. So I made a change in my own personal life, and I'm making a change in some patients' lives, and realized that a more natural approach to things is a much better way to do things. People got better, they went back to work, they got healthier. And my undergraduate work actually was in lipid biochemistry. And one of the things that I ran into was our approach to lipids was actually all wrong. And chiropractors certainly know this, that our low-fat, high-carb diet that we've been going on for the last 40 years is probably responsible for more deaths than probably any other thing we've done to the population. Cancer rates have gone from 3% to 60%. So this supplement came along, and it certainly agreed with what I knew about lipid biochemistry and cell physiology. And basically, I'm just trying to get out there and re-educate the people as to what really goes on and what the cell membrane, how important it really is. So, so to start things off, first of all, what is the membrane? Well, the membrane is made of protein and lipid. About 50% of the membrane is lipid, that being made up of omega-6, omega-3, saturated fats, cholesterol, and the rest is proteins. But interestingly enough, the membrane is about 25 to 33% omega-6 and only 1 to 3% omega-3. And as most people know, there's a big promotion of omega-3s out there. We need omega-3s for that, and omega-3s for because we're very short of them and all that sort of stuff. And that's actually not true. Omega-6 is by overwhelmingly the much more important fatty acid when you look at membrane and how it's made up. It's interesting that we keep, the simplified story has been told that omega-6 is pro-inflammatory and omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. Well, that is actually not true. If you actually look at the inflammatory, at the fatty acid cascade, you'll see that the omega-6 family goes down to PGE1, which is down here off of dihomo gamma-linolenic acid. PGE1, oops, there. PGE1 is actually the most powerful anti-inflammatory the body makes. And so you can see it's much more of a balanced system, which is you need some pro-inflammatory factors, you need some anti-inflammatory factors, of course. If we didn't have pro-inflammatory factors, if we just got a little cut in our finger, we would have bleed out. We would never mount the response necessary to stop that. So the simplistic view of pro and anti-inflammatory omega-6 omega-3 is totally flawed. But interestingly enough, the real problem we have is that we process most of the omega-6 we have in our diet. So canola, corn, soy oils, generic vegetable oils, margarine, all these people you see stacks of it on the shelf at the store, and this is what people are cooking with. This is what even high-end restaurants are cooking with. Certainly, your fast food chains are using it, And it's interesting, only recently have people begun to look at, are these things really healthy? I'm sure a lot of you have seen advertising say canola oil is healthy. Well, guess what? Not so much. Just 2 or 3 years ago, they looked at canola oil in an Alzheimer's disease in mice and found that it was actually made Alzheimer's disease much worse. The same with soy oil. So it turns out that these processed oils are actually causing all the problem. And in fact, there's an interesting stat that I heard from a colleague of mine, that heavy smokers actually over about a 25 to 28 year period have about a 16% chance of getting cancer. But consumers of high amounts of processed omega-6 or highly processed oils actually have an 83% chance of getting cancer over that same time period. 5 times more dangerous than smoking. But what's interesting about omega-6 is don't focus on so much on the cascade, because one of the things we do is we tend to really focus on the pathways, but actually the most important role of omega-6 is actually in the cell membrane construction itself. And it's not just the structure, but it helps the membrane function. And we have to think of, what does the actual membrane do? Well, it's the barrier between the cell and its environment. All the nutrition comes through there, all the communication comes through there, all its properties on how it actually functions goes through a cell membrane. So what is so important about omega-6? Well, here's something that's really interesting, and only one study has ever looked at it, all the way back in 1976. It turns out that linoleic acid, which is the predominant omega-6 in cell membranes, has the oxygen dissociation curve the same as hemoglobin. So it actually, so classically, and this is what I got taught in medical school and even in biochemistry, was that oxygen passively diffuses through the cell membrane. Well, that doesn't make any sense. If oxygen passively diffused the cell membrane, you'd have free oxygen running around a cell membrane, or running around the cell. Well, everything it touches, it would oxidize, including all the proteins and DNA and things that are quite important for cell function. So that doesn't make any sense. But if the cell membrane actually handles oxygen from the external part of the cell right to the mitochondria where all the energy production takes place, that's a big deal. In fact, there's 7 cell membranes that oxygen has to cross before from the lungs into the mitochondria, where it's actually used to produce energy. So let's look at the mitochondria. Well, here's a nice picture of a mitochondria. What do you notice? It's all membrane. I mean, look at it. The external's membrane, but the internal's got cristae, and the cristae are all fatty, all cellular membrane. And what's also important about that cell membrane is not only does where the nutrition crosses it, but if you look at all the enzymatic reactions that produce energy, they all take place on the cell membrane. And it turns out that 25 to 33% of the cell membrane is made up of omega-6, 40% of the mitochondrial membrane is made of omega-6, but 100% of the cardiolipin, which is where all those enzymatic reactions take place on, is made of omega-6. And here's what you've probably been taught in school, the electron transport chain. Look at all those proteins sitting right on the inner membrane. And it would make sense that those fats that are sitting there are the ones carrying the oxygen to all those reactive enzymes to make all that ATP that's from oxidative from the electron transport chain. So aerobic metabolism. Well, what is that aerobic metabolism? Use of oxygen, right? Can't be a passive process. Oxygen is too stable to float around the cell, and it's actually brought to the mitochondria via the membrane itself. If you actually could look at a membrane, you would see that these are not static things. They're constantly motion. These fats constantly flip back and forth. They move around at high rates of speed. And when you introduce processed fats like trans fats into the system, you slow down that membrane. You actually make the membrane more sticky, more like a plastic, more like a barrier. So again, it's so important. The cell membrane has to be fluid, it has to carry oxygen, it has to be very dynamic. All right, so So here at Pure Life Science, while the rest of the world is focusing on pathways, we have actually ignored the most critical pathway of all, oxygen. How does oxygen get in a cell? You can't survive without it. All right, so if you actually look at the amount of processed fats we're consuming in our diet, I bet you would see a direct correlation with the increase in chronic disease we see today, and cancer especially. All right. So what are the implications of reduced oxygenation of mitochondria? Well, here, I hope people out there have heard of the Warburg effect. Otto Warburg was probably the greatest biochemist and cell physiologist of the 20th century. Worked predominantly in Germany, but won a Nobel Prize, and two other Nobel Prizes were awarded to people who worked in the lab with him, including Krebs of the Krebs cycle. The Warburg effect he showed in the early 1950s showed that if you decrease the amount of oxygen getting to a cell, even by about 35%, even intermittently, that cell will turn cancerous. Now think of the proportion of adulterated processed fats that we're consuming in the American diet right now, or otherwise known as the SAD diet. I would bet that if you were able to examine those cell membranes of those people getting cancer, you would find adulterated fats probably in that 35–40% range in their cell membranes. That decreases oxygen level. Well, what happens when you decrease oxygen? The cellular processes don't have enough energy. They can't get the oxygen to produce the energy. They can become more anaerobic, which means higher acidity. But then if you look at the effect of decreased energy to the nucleus of the cell, well, the nucleus is sort of the regulator of cell division. I always look at cancer like, what is the most important role of the brain of the cell? It's to know when to stop dividing. When do cells divide uncontrollably? That's what cancer is. Interesting, there was a little study that came out. They actually removed the mitochondria from cells, and the cells started dividing infinitum. And what was interesting about the conclusions of the authors is they stated that they may have found the key to longevity. Well, in fact, they just found the key to cancer. Cancer is a cell that never stops dividing, right? Why is a kidney only that size? Why is the liver only that size? And what we've seen from 1900, and they do keep statistics and very accurate ones, 3% in 1900, today 60% of all Americans will get cancer at some point in their lifetime. What are the other benefits of a properly functioning cell membrane? Well, as you know, that most proteins are transmembrane proteins. And therefore, the health of the cell membrane is very important for the cellular function. Look at insulin. Insulin is a transmembrane protein. You will find that if you improve the cellular membrane health of an individual, if they're diabetic, which is of course rampant in the United States today, their medication use will go down, their sugars will drop, their insulin use will go down. These are all functions of healthy cell membranes. But there's something else that's in pure form that's interesting. We use a lot of pure evening primrose oil, and evening primrose oil has gamma-linolenic acid in it. Now, what does that really mean? Well, if you look back at the fatty acid cascade, and I'll go back to it here, gamma-linolenic acid, or GLA, goes to dihomogamma-linolenic acid, and that's what turns into PGE1. Now, what it does is it bypasses the delta-6 desaturase enzyme in the fatty acid cascade, and we do have, because of chemicals in our diet and processed food in our diet and things like that, we do have a certain proportion of the population, a fairly large portion, that delta-6 desaturase enzyme is not functioning very well. And so by putting gamma-linolenic acid in it, we actually increase the amount of PGE1 which is produced by bypassing that enzyme. And that makes people feel great because it's highly anti-inflammatory. So you'll notice if you put patients on this, especially patients with inflammatory conditions like arthritis, you'll see in about 2 weeks that their arthritis starts getting better. Their pain levels settle down. And because it happens so rapidly, you get patient buy-in. They'll be back for more. The product does speak for itself. And just to sort of emphasize the point, I got some stories. One is one of my patients actually had a 14-year-old chocolate lab, a dog that had bilateral hip arthritis and couldn't get up and down the stairs anymore. And so she asked me whether she could use Pure Farm in the dog, and I said it's perfectly safe for animals. All mammalian cell membranes are pretty similar. So after about 2 weeks, dog walks up and down the stairs. I don't know, dogs don't lie. They don't know what you're giving them. I also have examples of diabetic cats. You know, they lose weight, their fur gets better, they get more active, their behavior settles down. Lots of great stories. So what are the other benefits that you can see? Well, interestingly, look at the difference in the amount of omega-6 versus the amount of omega-3 based on which tissue you're looking at. And this makes sense because it varies quite widely. It's because different tissues do different things. You know, one of the questions I often get asked is about the omega-3 blood test that people are doing now. They're looking at omega-3 to omega-6 ratios in their blood. Well, in the blood, it's about 4:1. But if your skin, which has pretty much no omega-3 in it, was the same composition as your blood, it wouldn't do the job very well. And so you can see that omega-3 is almost negligible in the skin. It's also negligible in the innermost layer of the artery, or the intima of the artery. And so one of the simple things you could do with some of your patients is ask them to look at their skin. If they're taking fish oil and they notice they have age spots, that's actually oxidized omega-3 because it's not supposed to be there. They're overwhelming their system. What happens when they put them on Pure Form, all those good omega-6 make it into the skin and a lot of those age spots will fade and they'll notice much healthier skin. Well, this has implications for some of the most obvious difficult problems that you might see. Now, this may not be presenting to a typical chiropractor's office, but it demonstrates sort of how powerful the formulation really is. One of the things we did a small study called the Iowa study, looking at compliance of arteries with the use of Pure Form, and so if you look at arterial compliance, there's actually a normal curve you can plot people on based on using what's called a plethysmograph on their finger. It takes a measurement of the waveform across a section of artery. And the more stiff the artery is, the older you are in cardiovascular terms. Well, after about 4 months on the product, the average improvement was 9 years. So that means they were 9 years younger than their actual physical age. And what was really interesting, the number needed to treat, or the NNT, was 1.4. Now, if you look at statin drugs, cholesterol medications, which are finally coming under some sort of scrutiny, the minimum NNT I've ever seen in a published study, and that was the Jupiter study, was 85. It's probably much more like 140. And if anyone wants to know what NNT means, that means that you need to treat 140 people to find improvement in one. Whereas with Pure Form, you need to treat 1.4. That's pretty impressive. How about a rare genetic disorder? This is epidermolysis bullosa. 2 cases. One's a 27-year-old girl and one's an 18-year-old boy. The 18-month-old boy. The 18-month-old was interesting. He had not walked up until that point. And what happened was, once he got on the Pure Form, his blisters went down. In fact, his blisters went from 55 a day down to 5. On the right, this young girl is quite a gifted artist, and you can't see it in the pictures, but her right forearm is actually amputated from the disease. And she goes through 4 hours of painful dressing changes every single day because of this open basic burn on her skin that never heals. Well, if you look at the 2 slides, these are taken about 3 months apart. And what's happened is that big red area and that deep white area at the top is now much shallower and much smaller. And she's noted a vast improvement in her skin quality. Her energy levels gone up. One of the interesting things also, when I first met her, she was noticeably cyanotic. So she was bluish. And that's a pretty devastating thing to see, because as an emergency physician, I've seen blue people before and they don't live very long. And what was so gratifying to see is that 3 months later, when I saw her again, she was pink, healthy, and energetic. And you know, that's what we're doing this for. What else Diabetic wounds. I mean, I'm sure all of you have probably seen diabetic wounds and know how hard they are to heal. This is a pressure ulcer in a diabetic. Non-healing wound. You can see that on September 14th of 2016, it was roughly about 8 centimeters wide and about probably about 3 to 4 centimeters long. About 6 weeks later, look at that healing. Like, not only is it healed over top, but it's actually shallower as well. And what's really incredible is that at the end of 4 months, we did a small case series in about 17 patients. We had 86% fully healed and no recurrences at 6 months in diabetics. That's, I don't know anything more impressive than that. I've not seen data like that anywhere in any of the diabetic literature. So if I had to summarize, and I don't know how I'm doing on time, let me just check here. Oh, that's pretty good. Better oxygenation of tissues, increased healing, better receptor function, cancer prevention, a happy, energetic patient. As I said, feeling is believing. And that's why at Pure Life Science, we believe that Pure Form Omega is insane for the membrane. Now, we're giving a live giveaway. So 3 people will be chosen at random who are listening to this. And if they could email me or make contact in some way, we'll get the product out to them. So I'll announce them because I think we're going to pick them at random. Let me just see. I think, should we pick them already? Okay, well, there we go. Oh, okay, there we go. So winners are Carol Aiden, Don Benton, and Eric Raz. Well, there we go.
Yay.
Excellent. Yay. All right.
I do have one question.
Sure.
Came in. Can you take it with omega-3?
So I would not take it with the omega-3. I think that you choose this one over the omega-3. What'll happen is if you do take omega-3, your body will actually preferentially take up these essential fats and leave that omega-3 behind in your bowel, and you will not be pleased with the results. Oil is quite lubricating, right?
Got it. I feel like this was so helpful. Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to put them into the Q&A feature, or you can also chat them to the panelists. So if anybody else has questions, please let us know. And then also, like is on the screen right now, if you're one of the first 6 customers to use the coupon code CalChiro20, to receive 12 bottles, 1 case of Pure Form Omega liquid free with your first wholesale order. That's a great deal. And just from, this information that we've been given in the examples, I mean, kind of speaks for itself, if you ask me.
Yeah.
All you
have to do is go to purelifesciencecorp.com. That takes you right to the login page only for professionals. And then we'll get the stuff to you, and I think you'll try it and you'll love it. I mean, the product does speak for itself. Our retention rate on orders is about 93%, I believe. May even be better than that. People just don't come off of it because they feel so good on it. And if you have any questions at all, you can email me at jeff@pureformomega.com. And I will be pleased to answer any questions you would like.
Okay, perfect. Thank you again so much. Yeah, we'll leave that exclusive offer on the screen just for a little bit longer, just in case anybody may have missed it. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to either reach out to myself if you need Dr. Matheson's contact information, or he had it on the screen before this. We are so appreciative to you and Pure Form Omega for sharing that with us today and being on our Virtual Vendor Friday.
Sounds great. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, everybody have a good rest of your Friday, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.